You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Guys, super excited to dive into this past week's episode and talk about our actionable takeaways. And honestly, we are teeing up this fantastic segment for you on how to get any job, because sometimes the jobs are just obvious. Do this, do that, do that. But what if it's a job you really want and the path to get that job is just not obviously clear? Like in my case, hey, I want to be a pharmacist. Well, I need to go to get my bachelor's degree, and then I need to get a doctorate in pharmacy, and then I can then apply for these positions and knock it down. It's pretty linear. It's long, it's expensive, but it's pretty linear. What if you wanted to get any job just because the idea of the job lit you up? How would you even approach it? And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm doing great. Yeah, what's going on by you?
Well, aside from being super pumped to have this particular week's episode, one of the biggest things and my takeaway from the episode with Angela from Tread Lightly, Retire Early was talking about sleep. And you and her had this great dialogue at the end saying that how much you both value and need your sleep. And to be honest with you, Brad, in my own life, I had a story and it didn't make it into that particular episode, but it's so perfectly tied. My superpower is and has always been that I can sleep anytime, anywhere, and not in a narcoleptic type way. I just mean, like when people show that list of 12 things that you can do to improve your health, like the first one's usually, hey, make sure you're getting a full night's sleep. And I'm like, all right, man, check the box, moving on. What's the, that hasn't exactly taken me to the next fitness level, but I'm sure it hasn't hurt. And I always have had a little bit of pride about my ability to get a fantastic night's sleep and simultaneously not been as empathetic or sympathetic for other people that are struggling with that same issue, just because I've just basically been able to take it for granted. And this is a long way of saying that over the past 2 months or past month or so, that has dramatically changed. And it is tied to my son's potty training. We talked about this on the show. As he's gotten a lot better at it, he has suddenly become very committed to the idea of letting us know anytime that he needs to go to the bathroom. And for that duration of midnight, or frankly, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., that does not stop. So suddenly, for the first time in my life, and I realize that sounds a little bit selfish because there are other reasons that you should have to wake up, but for the first time in my life, I am waking up 4 to 5 times a night to take him to the bathroom. And to be honest with you, I'm angry about it. I'm so angry about it. And I now, it's the first time I've ever had to deal with this. And I'm in my mid-30s now.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, good on you for not having to deal with it for that long. But so he's waking up 4 times a night and literally waking you up to go to the bathroom?
It's tapering down just a little bit. Yeah, I mean, like I have no anchor for this. I have no basis for this. So when my wife proposed that we start potty training him at 21 months, I said, sure, why not? When I told you and a few other people, are like, wow, that's really early. I'm kind of glad. For a boy, yeah. I'm kind of glad I didn't know that because it's basically worked. I mean, I'd say he's 90% plus potty trained now, but he's so committed that anytime he has an urge, he wants to let us know and that he will wake up to do it. And yeah, man, I find myself waking up at midnight, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. And by the time I'm just shell shocked, I realize my wife has gone through this whole process and I was helping her to some varying degree in the early days with her son, but I had basically taken that for granted, more or less, because she was doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Not the case now. The dad is fully on duty with this boy and his potty training adventures.
That's funny. I have always been the opposite, right? I've always been a pretty poor sleeper, I feel like, or at least once I woke up in the middle of the night, I would almost invariably be up for the rest of the night. And then compound that with, I'm a pretty light sleeper, so I wake up fairly easily. So yeah, this has always been like a real source of stress for me. Even going at Camp FI in Florida a couple years ago, where A couple of us literally slept in the conference room and I slept in a closet.
Dude, the closets, it was more like you had found the catacombs.
But yeah, I mean, I guess the funny thing was I got my own single, right? I had this this very large utility closet that I was able to drag a single mattress into, and it was great.
It's amazing. You've been back to that camp, I think, 2 times since then, and that single event has become legendary for posterity.
Yeah, the 4 of us, it was me, Marla, who's been on the show a bunch of times, and Emma and Andrew. We had just a ball. It was like the most fun part of that whole weekend, which is already an amazing weekend. So yeah, that was kind of cool. But I guess more importantly, sleep hygiene. That's a phrase I used during the episode with Angela. I think that's something I've become much more aware of. Reading a book like Sleep Smarter from Sean Stevenson and listening to Arianna Huffington's podcast. I mean, this has become a big aspect of her life. Now, I think she runs a company called Thrive. And just normalizing, again, Jonathan, we always talk about normalizing the talk about finances, but normalizing the talk about not only sleep, but how important it is. I think a lot of people still hold to the ideal of, oh, I'll pull an all-nighter to study for that test, or, oh, that executive only gets 4 hours of sleep per night. Those things are crazy. I don't know about you, but I never pulled an all-nighter ever. I prioritize sleep so much. I mean, you basically have the cognitive function of being drunk when you are pulling an all-nighter. So why would you go into a test like that? It never made any sense to me. But it makes even less sense to me now that I've been kind of researching this loosely.
Well, I have been guilty of many all-nighters. I can't comment on whether or not they enhanced my GPA or test scores. I was always a very mediocre test taker, so I'm not sure if it helped or hurt. But I can say regarding sleep hygiene that although in my late teens, early 20s, was definitely guilty of letting the TV send me off to sleep, right? I mean, that was just kind of something that happened in the past time. As I've come to the end of my 20s, beginning of my 30s, sleep hygiene actually is a big deal, regardless of whether or not I really need it, because again, I can go to sleep anytime, anywhere. I make sure that my phone has no like blue lights visible. It's face down, it's somewhere else. Fortunately, in most days, I don't need an alarm anymore, so I'm waking up very naturally. There's no TV in my room. I also make sure there's no like LED red lights or green lights or anything. Like there is something to be said, and there's a lot of studies to back this up, that all of these wonderful notification lights that are there on all these different electronic devices. I mean, if you think about how many electronic devices you have with different LED lights, these can actually cause damage long-term to your ability to get a restful sleep. And I would imagine for a guy that found a catacomb at a Camp FI to sleep in, you probably also use some similar tactics for your bedroom as well.
Yeah, I certainly do. Yeah, we have no red lights at all. We have these blackout curtains. We keep a fairly constant bedtime just so our bodies are used to that. And we're also kind of winding down before bedtime. We're not sitting there playing like action-packed video games or like going on YouTube or on our phones and, like you said, getting that blue light. So as much as you can avoid that, certainly in the 30 to 60 minutes before bed helps. Also, for me, it's been a lot of stress reduction. I think that's on the path to 5. While I don't have an alarm per se, I still am responsible for waking up my family in the morning because they're all kind of longer sleepers than I am. So I wake everybody up for school. So I do vaguely have a time that I have to get up. But if you're going to sleep at 9:30 or 10 and the time you have to get up is 7 a.m., that's still 9+ hours. What happens is now if I wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, I don't flip out. I don't look at the clock every 10 minutes, stressing out that the time is evaporating. I just chill out. Maybe if I touch my phone, which I try not to, I'll throw on like the Headspace meditation app to just calm down. But obviously going on the phone is not ideal because that can lead down a rabbit hole. But I just try to just relax and say like, all right, is stressing out at this point going to help me any? No. So, I mean, if I woke up after a 4-hour sleep, I have a 1-hour intermission between 2 to 3, and then I sleep from 3 till 6:30 or thereabouts. That's still a pretty darn good night of sleep.
Well, let's go ahead and switch gears and talk about this past week's episode with Angela. And there was so much in here, a lot of it tied to what we just discussed, but I wanted to spend a few minutes actually talking about making your home more energy efficient. And honestly, Brad, this is something that I've been doing a little bit of research on my own. And, as I alluded to in the episode, with regards to the lighting, I have been kind of taking the passive approach of, oh, well, when the light burns out, at that point, I'll go ahead and replace it with, a more efficient LED light. And this is possibly the stupidest argument ever for not replacing it. I had read somewhere at some point, well, the one nice thing about incandescent lights is, is that they actually will heat your home as well.
Oh,
And somewhere I had like filed that away as like useful information. And then I was thinking about it there. It's like, that's like buying insurance as an investment vehicle. If we want to heat our home, let's heat our home. If we want lighting, let's light our home. Let's not try to blend the two.
Oh my God.
So,
Jonathan, that is the worst case of like confirmation bias I think I've ever heard of.
I'm only bringing it up now in the show just for the sake of this conversation, but it's somewhere in my mind, it had lodged. And like, I think I had like set it aside as like, oh, well, maybe that isn't an extra reason for me not to go out and make this investment in all these extra lights. And I thought about it now. I was like, this article was probably written by an incandescent light company who is just grasping at any straw that they could come up with for why you should hold on to these incandescent lights. I have no idea, but I decided relatively recently after recording that episode that, you know what, I'm going to go to Costco, buy 40 lights, and I'm going to switch out every light in my home with LEDs. 1/25th of the energy expenditure. I think it's going to work out. And if I need to, I will insulate my home later.
All right. So I've got a question for you. And I assume many people out there are equally as lacking in knowledge as I am on these light bulbs. So there's the old school incandescent, and then there's compact fluorescent. But are LEDs different and more efficient than compact fluorescent, or are they the same? I mean, again, pardon my ignorance here, Jonathan, but help me out.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I feel like you're putting me on the spot as the in-house expert for lighting. But I'll do my best. CFLs contain small amounts of mercury in them, so for whatever reason, whether that's justified or not, I guess maybe tuna fish has some amount of mercury in it as well. But I've always been a little bit leery of introducing tons of CFL bulbs into my home, so the LEDs just kind of naturally appealed to me more. But the cost was obviously more. So like a CFL bulb, I think it's like around $2 a bulb right now, if you're replacing wholesale all the bulbs in your house, whereas the LED lights were maybe at one point they were closer to like $5, $6, $7. They've come down. I think they're like $4 or less now at Costco. I think you can get them even less than $4 a bulb now. The nice thing is the LED lights last almost 3 times as long as a CFL bulb. And when you look at some charts that are available on the internet, I'll link to this one article in the show notes for this episode. What we're kind of interested in is that total estimated cost over a longer period of time, kind of like an investing timeline, right? So let's use 20 years. An incandescent bulb, one bulb, assuming that it were actually going to last or that you'd have to replace it every so often, that one bulb, if you stuck with incandescent, it's going to have a total cost of around $211 over that 20-year period of time. If you were to change to like a CFL, it'd be around $54. So you're saving effectively, 75%, Brad? And if you can, awesome, got my math right. And then if you move to LED, it moves down even farther to $34 per bulb, assuming that you can get that LED for at the highest end around $4 a bulb. So the obvious winner here is the LED over the long term, especially tying this to the conversation with Angela. If the colors look good, right? I mean, that was the thing. I never particularly noticed this, but I didn't have an appreciation for kind of color spectrum several years ago. If the colors look just as good to the point where you can mix it in with your CFLs or incandescents and no one will even notice, then it becomes obvious. Every bulb that you change is going to save you around $170. You multiply that times 40, we're talking about serious money there. So I just think all of that. Now your house may not be quite as warm, but you probably also have less chance of that incandescent bulb starting to fire. So you got to find the right temperature. So that's kind of where I'm at, dude. I think, what do you think? Go out and buy 30, 40 bulbs. Now, the cool thing here is I actually have Dominion Power or Dominion Energy here in Virginia, and they've always done something for us called budget billing. It's an option that you can set it up where basically they look at your cost over the past year. And, what's interesting about that is you'll have some really expensive months when you're running the heat or AC a lot. And then you have some other months where it's just, it's Virginia. We have 4 seasons. It's perfect outside. It's perfect inside. You don't really have to run anything. Those months cost a lot less. If you're trying to set your budget and stick to a certain number each month, I've always appreciated the budget billing that they just give me one set amount that averages my highs and lows into one number and it's fixed for the course of the year. The following year, they look at your bill and see whether you paid too much or too little, and they adjust it. So the cool thing is, though, if you wanted to find out the difference, in what it's actually costing you month to month, you can still log on to their website and actually see your energy expenditure for the past month. So it wouldn't be very difficult for you to go back and compare the energy that you expended the last year and really see, did this actually make a difference? So yeah, I'm in, man. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, that's very cool. This is interesting to me because, I'm looking at this chart that you mentioned, and we definitely will link to it in the show notes. It's cool thinking about this cost over 20 years, not just one bulb. If you're talking cash flow, well, it kind of stinks to lay out $4 per bulb for an LED all throughout your house, right? I mean, you're talking potentially a couple $100. But if you're looking over the course of a 20-year period, it's a no-brainer. Each of those bulbs with the purchase price plus the actual electricity cost, which is so greatly reduced, is going to be somewhere around $30. And that's compared to $210 roughly for an incandescent. So if you still have a house filled with incandescent bulbs, this can really be a big money savings. And I think what's cool, Jonathan, and I haven't even told you this, we're getting these solar panels. They have not been installed yet. We're still in the queue. So hopefully within the month or thereabouts. But I've already noticed my behavior change. And I think maybe it's the combination of chatting with Angela and these solar panels. But I am being much more conscious about leaving lights on and running the air conditioner and the heat and whatever. I'm just so much more aware of it. Again, it's kind of like a game. And I cannot wait to get this cool app when I get these solar panels showing our current usage and our current production. It's going to be like a real-time thing in essence where you can just play around with this. I think when we originally had the quote, they were anticipating we were going to cover 80% of our electric bill or our energy utilization from these solar panels. But I'm going to make it my life's goal, basically. I think maybe with a lot of these practices like the LEDs, but also by just changing behavior, I'm going to make it my life's goal, I think, to cover 100% of our costs. I really think we can do it pretty easily.
I love the challenges, and I love the fact that our community gets involved in these challenges as well. In fact, just to tie a quick thread, we were talking this like about a week ago about how cool would it be if you could get your tax bill, right? What you are expecting to pay versus what you actually paid. If you could keep that under, what did we say, like $100?
Yep.
That would be just kind of the 5 bar. If you could do that, you are a tax ninja. And Tinker in our Facebook group actually posted this past week that he was able to get his tax bill, like what he expected versus what he actually paid, $0. Now, I'm not sure if that was federal and state, but at the federal level for sure, like he totally crushed it. Said it's the first time that he's pulled that off in his entire tax filing history.
Yeah, Jonathan, not only is this the first time in his history, this is the first time I've ever heard of somebody getting a 0 return. I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine that you could get your withholding and your liability exactly right to the dollar. I mean, we talked kind of half jokingly a couple of weeks ago about $100 plus or minus, right? Either getting a refund or owing up to plus or minus $100 would be an amazing return because you didn't over withhold throughout the year and give an interest-free loan to the government, and you're not owing a significant amount at tax time, which is uncomfortable for people. So to me, a perfect tax return is plus or minus $100. But yeah, Tinker got it to $0. And he had this amazing post in the Facebook group that I just wanted to read here. And he said, I attribute some of this to luck as my target was to optimize it within $100. But the planning part can be attributed 100% to Choosify and Brad and Jonathan. Thank you guys. Choosify prompted me to self-learn a few financial things like learning how individual payroll taxes are calculated, how to calculate traditional IRA contribution amounts when I am in the phase-out salary range, selling off low-performing assets to balance off gains from high-performing assets, etc. I'm also trying hard to DIY these days rather than calling for paid help. I fixed a leaky faucet and a wall clock so far. I know it might sound like a small deal for most folks, but for someone like me who never did DIY, it's a big win. I'm so thrilled that both of you commented on my post. Thanks again for all you do.
We'll do more than that, man. When we have a challenge, Brad, there needs to be like a prize for this. He is a tax ninja. Tinker, we want to send you a t-shirt. Can you just send us an email to feedback@choosify.com? Let us figure out, give us the address you want us to send that to. We are beyond blown away. Brad, you have never in your life pulled off a $0 tax return. Can we just say that for the record?
Never seen or heard of it either.
That is so freaking cool. All right, let's take a few more minutes. I wanted to talk just a second. Angela created, in the early days, she created this Women of the Fire movement, and she set the preface for that was an article that a well-known blogger had written talking about their favorite blogs. And in that article that they had written with the bunch of people listed. There was one female blogger on that list. And when they prompted him, they asked him, is there anybody else that you're familiar with? Is there anyone else that you like? He could only think of one other. And Angela said, well, that's silly. I can think of at least 30. And she went ahead and made that list.
Yeah. And Jonathan, people from all over the place started sending her other blogs. There are hundreds now. And this is now the most comprehensive list of female fire bloggers anywhere. So, I mean, it's a marvelous resource.
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. And to our audience, we want to make sure that this gets absolutely as much exposure as possible. So we're putting a link to Angela's article, The Women of the Fire Movement. That is going to be linked up in the show notes for today's episode. Definitely check that out when you get a chance. All right, Brad. Now, I thought what we could do for the second half of this show is talk a little bit about how to get any job. Now, Titus, the thread here is with Angela, one of the things was, well, you can either do what you love or you can make money, but you can't have both. Now, I get, obviously, that's not true, but I think a lot of us do assume that. We kind of believe that we're either going to have to make a choice between our passion or our paycheck. Ooh, that feels like a title. But either way, like how many of us at the age of 17 years old making that decision that we're going to make that's going to last us for the rest of our life, just we don't have all the information. We don't have all the options. What if you could get any job? And there was someone that could kind of pull back the curtain on what you would need to do to be able to pull that off. So to set up this conversation, I was talking with Chris Hutchins, who, if you remember, we actually featured him on our show. It's episode 71. His company, Grove, which you can find at hellogrove.com, has a financial planning company, which is a really, really cool model. Definitely listen to that episode. But because of that, I was following up with him and I was talking with him at FinCon this past year. And as part of that conversation, I was talking to him about the process because he's a CEO of a company. I was talking to him about the process of getting a job with an organization, like his. And I said, so let's say I wanted to get a job with your company. What would I do? Would I go in and I would fill out the application? He hard stopped me, Brad. He hard stopped me and said, look, Jonathan, is there anything that you could do to tell an employer that you care less about the job than fill out the application form on their website for the job? I said, wait, I don't understand what's going on right now. And so he walked me through what it would actually look like to get any job, right? That's the name for this, how to get any job. And by the end of it, my whole world was like realigned and I saw the Matrix and I was just like, whoa, you guys are playing at a different level. And while I don't know if this is going to be the frame for everybody in every single scenario, I think it's such a valuable conversation that I knew we needed to have Chris back on the show and have him share with our audience that framework. And so Chris, with that, welcome back to the show, man.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Good to hear from you guys again.
Well, it took me a total of 12 months to convince you to come back on, but we're so excited that you're here. First of all, how are things going with Grove? What's going on in your world, man?
It's great. I remember last time I recorded from home because I didn't have a quiet space at the office. And now we've got, almost 30 people working here and 4 phone booths that I can go pick from to do a call in. So things are going really well.
So wait, Chris, are you actually in like a soundproof phone booth right now? Is that where you're calling in from?
Yeah, we have 4 soundproof phone booths with, light ventilation and lighting and power and everything. It's pretty cool.
We need to turn back on our video chat feed so I can now explore this phone booth a little bit more closely. You're like Superman in there.
Exactly.
So let's talk about this conversation that we had at FinCon. I said to you, how do I apply to come work for Grove? Where do I go to fill out the application? Your feedback to me was, if you really wanted the job, why would you fill out the application? Like, how do those two go together? I still barely understand.
Yeah, so I think when I was starting to, cut my teeth in tech, I came out to San Francisco. I was like, I want to get a job. And I didn't really have a huge set of marketable skills. I wasn't an engineer or designer. And so I really needed to kind of prove myself in some way, shape, or form. Lots of people are out there. I'm just going to apply for every job. And I assume that everyone's applying for every job. I think one time I applied for a job at Google and I got a rejection email for the job in like less than 15 minutes. And I was like, okay, so this is not the path. I even later, once I ended up working at Google, found the person that sent it, was like, was this automated? And then she was like, no, I just popped up, looked at your resume, you weren't a fit, goodbye. And I was like, there's surely no way that an employer can get a full picture of me and decide whether they want to hire me in that short of a time frame. And so I was like, there's got to be another way. So I made a short list of companies that I was like, these are the companies that I really want to work with or work for. And, I thought, what do I care about? What are the problems I want to solve? I just went all in on one company first. this company, Simple Geo. I was really excited about their mission. I was really excited about what they did. Had a lot of respect for the founders. And I was like, okay, so first I was like, what's every path I have to the founders? I made a presentation that was like a 20-minute PowerPoint about why I thought I would be, of huge value add to the company. I found someone I knew that was one of their investors, and I got them to convince the founders to let me give them a presentation. And so I pitched them like, a 20-minute presentation with slides why they should hire me. And they did. So here we are. Like, that was my first job in tech. I kind of went all out and tried to get everyone I know to send notes and references and tell people how awesome I was so that, they would even consider me for a job that they didn't even have yet.
Let's go back and let's kind of parse that down. So there were multiple things there you did that were incredible. One of them was identify a company that you can really get excited about and then pin down actually why that is. You should be able to define that and then look for essentially what I felt like I heard you say was, what are their challenges? What are their struggles? Is that something that I can help with? That kind of helped you create the frame. But regardless of doing all that research, one of the things that really stood out to me is you needed to identify a path to the founder. Could you explore that a little bit further?
Yeah. So if you break it down, now that I'm on this side of the table, it's like there is nothing I want more than to hire someone who's like wildly passionate about what we're doing, right? Working at a startup's hard. Early in your career, almost all things you're learning how to do. So that's hard. If you have the excitement about what you're doing, I am, as the hiring manager, way more convinced that you'll be able to get through whatever roadblocks you have if you're super passionate about what we're doing as a company. Seeing that is almost like, wow, we've got to figure out a way to make this work. There's a guy on our team named Arthur who we hired who sent me a presentation similar to the one I had sent to Simple Geo and was like, here's all the stuff I could do. I love what you're doing. And he just hammered me for 6 months. He was like, I gave this presentation at work about financial wellness. Here it is. Here's an article that's awesome. You should read it. And eventually we finally had a role that made sense for Arthur. And he was the first person I called. And I was like, Arthur, we have this role. You have to come in and interview.
I actually think you were talking about Arthur when we were talking at FinCon sometime last year. It's like, I don't have space for this guy. So let's work through Arthur's journey if we can do that for just a moment. So day one, he sends you an email. Give us some sense of what that first email looks like. And do you reply? Because what's Arthur's path to the founder, right?
Yeah. So a cold email, I think. Almost every email is out there, right? Like if you can't find an email of someone somehow, you're doing it wrong. Like, it's going to be tough for you to get that job. So he just sent an email and he's like, Grove looks awesome. I'm reaching out because Grove looks awesome. I really align with the mission of making financial advice more accessible and valuable. I'm also super passionate about anything that comes to financial optimization. Are you up for a quick call? I didn't respond right away, but he followed up a few days later and was like, hey, do you have time? And I was like, all right, this kid's got some hustle. Like, he's willing to get there. So brought him in to at least meet us at the office. He gave a presentation about why he thought he would be great. We didn't really have a role there, but he just kept following up. He followed up with the presentation he made. He followed up with an article he thought was good. He published a blog post. He followed up with that. He gave a presentation at his office about personal finance, and he sent that. I shared it around the company. It just was one of those things where I could tell that he wasn't just saying he was excited about finance to us and then saying the same thing to 50 other companies. Like, he really cared about what we were doing. And that's the kind of person that every company wants on their team.
Yeah, Chris, that's really amazing. So you're saying, obviously, every email address is out there. So if that's your stumbling block and you can't even get started, you're probably not doing it right. Does it have to go through the founder? So, I mean, at some level, you're not going to get in touch with Sergey and Larry from Google. That's not happening. But are there levels that you've seen? So, let's talk outside of Grove. Have you seen this work in other companies?
Yeah, I mean, my wife runs business development and partnerships at Lyft. If you wanted to work on her team, the worst possible route to get to her is to try to get in front of, Logan or John, the two founders, is not the right path. They have so much going on and they're probably so disconnected from hiring on the BD team that's definitely not the right path. So, I always say, if you're trying to find a job, try to figure out who the hiring manager or decision maker is on that team and go there, maybe even one level higher, right? So it might be the person running BD or running the business, unit that reports to. At a startup, it could be anyone, right? If anyone at this company refers a candidate for any job, like, we jump on it because we're like, man, we trust our employees to know who amazing people are. So at some scale, that happens so much. Like at Google, I think if you refer a candidate, they always get talked to, but there's probably thousands of candidates getting referred every day. So the bigger the company, the more closely you need to get to the job. Whereas at a 30-person company, you could get to any single person at the company. I just happened to have more connections. The company I joined was all engineers except for the founders. And one of the founders was also an engineer. So I knew no one in engineering land. So my only route was to the founder because everyone else was kind of very connected to the engineering community that I was pretty disconnected from.
And Chris, you're describing Arthur, right, as like, there's this fine line here, though, between hustling and being annoying. Okay, he sent this first email, you didn't get back to him. He sent the second, and then, okay, you started the conversation. But put yourself in his shoes or somebody else's shoes on the other side. At what point do you give up? And are there different avenues?
And surely there's different avenues, right? He could get an intro from someone else. He could try to flag me on social media instead of there's a lot of avenues. The interesting thing is Arthur probably actually had a bunch of people in common and probably could have reached out there. And I'm sure he would have as his second alternative. He wrote with such heart that he was like actually excited about what we're doing that, it didn't feel like he was just persistent to be annoying. Like he actually cared. And so I respect that. I was looking at a candidate for another role we're hiring for. And on this time, I'm doing the outreach and I'm being the annoying, persistent person. And I sent this person 3 follow-ups, in the course of 2 weeks. And they wrote back, finally wrote back and said, Chris, I admire your persistence. You've been emailing me at my work email. Here's my personal email. Let's chat on Friday. And so, it was funny. I got on the phone and I was like, yeah, sorry. I just thought you seemed like such a great fit. I wanted to reach out. And he's like, no, I admire like how hard you pushed. I can say there's probably a point at which it's annoying if you're not getting any feedback, you're not changing anything, you're not being genuine. But I think most people's belief of where that line is, it's further away than they think.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I'm just trying to put the ordering rules together, like in my mind. And obviously there's no hard and fast rule here, but you said Arthur knew some people who he potentially could have went through. So in theory, if you were advising someone in the audience how to go about this, if they have a warm intro, if they have a friend or colleague or something that can introduce you, would that be, generally speaking, the number one way to go about it?
Yeah. I'm going to respond to an email from my friend or my investor faster than I'm going to respond to an email from, a random person. So definitely. But when I think about this from our perspective, when I'm trying to work on a partnership, there's only so many favors I want to throw in on, hey, can you introduce me to this person? Can you introduce me to this person? So I've over time started saying, you know what? Why don't I just try to reach out myself? And if I don't hear from someone, then I'll have a friend do it. And I guess it depends on how many eggs you have, in the metaphorical basket. If there's like, I want to work at this one company and this is it, this is the one I want my intro for, to go for it. And that's what I did when I was, trying to find my job at Simple Geo. If you're like, here's 20 companies that I could work at that I'm really excited about, you might want to cold email them before you just reach out and ask for intros. Because if you ask your friends for intros to 20 different companies, they're not going to want to make the 20th intro, and they're probably not going to make any if those don't pan out after that.
Yeah, I have a couple follow-up questions related to positioning yourself. So from a resume perspective, from a soft skills versus hard skills perspective, and also like your degree. So all these are kind of bundling together. What is the story you tell yourself about yourself, and how are you presenting that to your employer? Is the person with the MBA always the one that's going to get the job? Like, how does someone that maybe doesn't have that degree but thinks they're a good fit, how do they navigate this?
So I can't speak to other industries, but I couldn't tell you what more than half the people at my company's degree is in, nor I guess I know the handful of people who have an MBA, so maybe that's fair, but I definitely didn't hire them because they had the MBA. I would say it's like a net neutral thing. It doesn't add anything. It maybe doesn't take anything away. So for me, the MBA doesn't matter. What your degree was in doesn't matter. I would say in some technical fields, maybe it matters a little more. If you're an engineer with a computer science degree from MIT, I might be more quickly reactive to look at you than if you had a Bachelor of Arts degree and have no professional experience writing software. I will say I care much more about have you had professional experience doing the thing you're doing than I do about whether you have a degree doing the thing you're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's probably important to kind of point that kind of line in the sand. So an engineer, these are hard skills. You need to be able to code and perform certain tactics. A lot of roles, though, are not hard skills. They're soft skills. How does someone position themselves to be able to get any job if they have these soft skills?
Yeah, so it's funny. I think about like sales and business development. The skill you need there is the ability to talk to people, get a deal done, and that kind of stuff, which is literally the job interview, right? If you can get me on the phone, you've now convinced me that you can do the job. So that's great. That's why I think it's so important to not try to go down the regular path, because if you're trying to join an early stage company who's going to struggle with building their brand and closing deals, and your best approach to try to get a job there is to just cold email and then give up, that's not great. That company's going to need a lot more out of you in your day-to-day responsibilities.
So definitely with the hard skills, that's kind of why I wanted to draw that line in the sand and separate. But when we're talking about the soft skills, does it matter what school you went to? Does it matter if you did 2 years of community college? Like, perspective here.
It's kind of interesting, right? It doesn't actually matter. I went to Colorado State University. It's certainly not in the top 200 schools. And maybe I have a warmer spot in my mind for people who didn't go to the top 100 schools, the top 20 schools than other people do. Ultimately, when you're trying to hire people, it's like, I want hardworking people. I want smart people. There's lots of things that I'm looking for in an employee. And it's really hard to figure that out before you meet them. It's certainly an indicator, right? If someone went to a top tier school, it's more likely that I will assume that they're a smart person than if they didn't. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to hire them because of that. I look around the room and the only people that I know what school they went to are people from Virginia, because we somehow have a third of the companies from Virginia. And so I just know that half of them went to UVA or Virginia Tech. But I don't know where half of the people here went to undergrad. I have I'm looking at two people in the office right now. I don't know where they went to undergrad. That's how little it mattered to me in the hiring process.
Chris, I want to go back to this first conversation that we had. Jonathan and I, you just blew our minds. It's something that once you learn it, it's obvious, but Jonathan and I would have just put in a resume through, here's the job opening page on the website. And we've had multiple guests on our podcast come in and say, oh, I couldn't find a job. I was sitting in a Starbucks and sending in hundreds of resumes. Now knowing what I know from Chris, that's an insane tactic. What are your thoughts when you hear that? And then also talk us through with this simple geo, how many hours did it take you to put that together? So contrast the effort that someone's going to send that one resume that probably takes 5 seconds versus what you did to get one targeted job.
Yeah, I put in a lot of time, 20, 30 hours easily trying for this particular opportunity. And that's a lot of time. And maybe if they hadn't given me the job, I would have the next time been like, well, maybe let's put in 5 instead of 30 because, there's just only so many hours in the day. I couldn't afford to do that 1,000 times. But at the same time, your goal is to stand out, and there's thousands of people applying for all of these jobs. People want to hire the person that's the most excited, the most passionate. I will say there's this big broad caveat, which is before you throw all that time in, at least try to figure out, is there any shot they would hire you? At an early stage tech company, there is a pretty good shot it'll hire anyone if they don't already have someone in that anyone role. Obviously, if they have the job posting on their website, they'll definitely hire someone for that role. But the further and further you go down, the less someone's just going to hire a generalist. So if you're joining a 5,000 person company, it'll be harder to say hey, I'll do anything. I'll just work hard. That might be harder. But I don't know. I think if I put myself in the shoes that I'm in now, man, all I want is a team filled with people that are so passionate about the company, the mission. And if someone reached out like that, it would be hard for me to imagine a world where I wouldn't just respond immediately.
Is there a jobs application on hellogrove.com?
Totally. There absolutely is. And
go straight to the recycle bin.
No. We actually review all of them. So you can apply and we'll review them. But the reason you don't apply and you go through another channel isn't that you'd want to be considered. I assume that many companies will consider all the people that apply. They might take longer to consider them. They might consider them on the same playing field as everyone else that comes in. Whereas if you come in through an indirect channel, you come in through a referral, you will get a different level of treatment. And when it comes to getting hired for a competitive role, that different level of treatment is maybe the difference. That's maybe the thing that sets you out. I'm looking out right now. There's a guy named Colin on our team. He built a website about why he wanted to work for Grove. He used our design elements. He wrote a few blog posts and he made a website. It was grovemaybe.com. And I don't think it's up anymore. But he built a website to show off how excited he was for working at Grove. the tactics work. He wanted to show off how excited he was. I can tell you that set him aside from lots of other people.
I have a follow-up on this. So this is Silicon Valley, and people to some degree expect things to operate a little bit differently there. But my perspective on this is, if it works there, where almost this is the bar, how much more does it work everywhere else?
So honestly, I don't know the answer to that question.
It's open-ended.
Colin lived in Florida at the time. He wasn't even from Silicon Valley. So one, I could say you don't have to be from here to do that. Two, I can only imagine that you would stand out more at any other industry than ours, right? I can imagine that the average person is not making a website to convince someone why they want to work on a team or at a company. If the game is how do you stand out, every single person hiring in this country is like trying to hire amazing, passionate people. I don't know anyone where I'm like, hey, what are you trying to hire on your team? And they're like, I'm just trying to hire a bunch of idiots. No, like everyone wants to hire hardworking, excited people. And like, those are the kinds of people, if that's who you are and that's the company, how you feel about it, find a way to show them. Like I said, a year ago, like the way to show them is probably not to just send a resume. Now, I would actually say send the resume, because most companies have a system where they track candidates. And in the note, if you're like, hey, I already applied for the job, just want you to know that you have some of my information on file, you're going to make it easier for them, because then you're in their system. They don't have to go say, oh, now I got to create your profile, and now I got to go look on LinkedIn to see what your title is and where you work. Definitely apply so you're in their system, but flag yourself in some other way. I could think of something that no one's done that would be interesting, which is, we're a small company, we're growing. If someone really wanted to be noticed by us, they could go online and start looking on the internet at people who in Twitter or anywhere, asking questions about money, and start talking to them about money, showing their expertise, referencing our products, that kind of stuff. Like that could get you noticed by a company, like doing anything to help something they're working on. If you came to them with a partnership opportunity, I'd be like, okay, so you're already doing the job. Like you've proved that you could do this job I'm trying to hire for before we've even hired you. That would be amazing. It's like, find some way to add value and someone will respond.
Yeah, Chris, that's super cool. So adding value, and what you said before is probably the perfect summary of this. Your goal is to stand out. And frankly, Jonathan and I were the idiots that you were describing there. We would have just gone down the standard path, because until you know this stuff, maybe it's not that obvious. I guess if I had put some thought into getting a new job, I would have said, okay, this probably isn't the optimal path, but it's the standard path. That's what everybody does. That's what a lot of us think, right? Because we just don't know any better. But then when we hear someone like you who's had this experience come on and say, hey guys, there's a better way, you can brainstorm and come up with these better ways. And I'm curious, obviously Arthur sent you some emails and Colin created this website. Like, have you seen any other just interesting examples? Even off the top of your head, Chris, I know I'm kind of sandbagging you here, but like that other people might say like, okay, maybe I could do that too.
Yeah. So if a company's hiring a lot of people, so we're hiring lots of financial planners. If someone came in, and this has actually happened in the past, someone came in and said, look, I know you guys are hiring more than one person, so I'd love to be considered, but I also know a lot of other people. So here's 2 other people you should be interviewing. I'm like, wow, this person not only can do this job, but they can help us grow the company. That would be amazing. If someone were to know that one of the goals right now is to grow faster, they could make an introduction to a potential partner. They could make an introduction to a potential customer. That would be super valuable. I can think of another candidate, and she went out and listened to every podcast interview I'd ever been on, so that she just felt like when she was writing an email, when we were talking, when she was presenting, when she was everything, like she just had a layer of context about me and the company that I was really shocked that wow, that was really high. He had a level of context on me and the company and what we were thinking and how I thought about the company, how I talked about the company, that most people didn't have. And it might not have directly given her a leg up in the way that I would know, in that she did mention she'd listen to the podcast, but she didn't come out and every time say, I heard you say this. But I have no doubt that when she was talking about things about Grove that were exciting, when she was talking about the role and why it'd be exciting, she totally leaned on knowledge that she got from listening to your podcast, to other podcasts I've been on, that brought her more context than she would have gotten from the internet.
And like to parse that, essentially she was speaking with your voice, right? Your passion came through. She understood what your vision was, what you were trying to accomplish. And then she was essentially able to replicate and portray that to other people. That's actually a very, very interesting point in that for this person that's doing research and is trying to connect with the founders, if they're in a role like yours and they have done public appearances, they've done guest spots, a lot of that passion, that vision actually comes through because you're not trying to hide it. You're trying to spread it. To be able to then represent that is a key differentiating factor from someone that has an application.
Yeah, absolutely. She actually went one step beyond what most people have access to, and she'd had friends in the venture capital community. And so she was able to get a copy of one of our fundraising decks and came in and was like, these are the things I know you're focused on and how I can add value to them. And I was like, I don't know if I should be upset that someone's sharing our fundraising deck or be like excited that you were resourceful enough to get a hold of it.
Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this information with us so that we can then share it with our community. For our audience, go back and listen to episode 71. Honestly, what Chris is doing is amazing. And to realize this, there are people pursuing financial independence all over the world. Chris is in the startup community. He's in Silicon Valley, and he is hardcore in the FI community. It's amazing. When you listen to that episode, you're going to truly appreciate the path that he followed is the path that so many of us are either looking for or already on in some capacity. So that was one thing that's really cool about this. The other half of this is Chris himself is solving a problem. I mean, one thing that came through in that episode, the state of financial planning inside the country and frankly, really around the world is deplorable. There are good and bad actors, but the bad actors are very, very common. In fact, one statistic that Chris gave me is that 9 out of 10 financial planners do not operate with a sole fiduciary responsibility. In episode 3 and repeatedly throughout our podcast, we talked about how egregious these fees can actually be when you start stacking them on top of each other and they're unseen. You don't even know where they're coming from. It can cost you a third or more of your expected portfolio, and just by not knowing how your planner is being paid and what their motives actually are, incentive alignment. So Chris, I'd love for you, just people can go back and listen to episode 71, but if you could just give us like a 1 to 2 minute highlight reel, what is Grove and where are you guys headed?
Yeah, well, first off, there's a great example of what you can do to get a job is just learn how to tell a story almost as good as I can, like maybe even better. Yeah, so if you're interested, I've been a long time nerdy FI person also, and what I realized is that some people will get on the train and figure it out themselves and some people won't. And those people still need to, achieve financial independence in their own way. And that might not be retiring early. That might not be by the craziest amount of saving, but they need help. And so we started a company where we can pair you with financial planners to help you figure out what to do. And that's kind of it. Check it out. hellogrove.com. Yeah, I don't need to sell it too much more because I know this community gets it.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, well, let's go ahead and take a few minutes, and I want to talk about frugal wins of the week. Zach, what do you got for us?
All right, Jonathan, we got a couple this week. The first one is from Bethany. She says, my husband bought some home improvement supplies we needed last week at Menards, and this week they were having an 11% off sale of everything. I called and asked the staff if they could price match and found out that they had a rebate adjustment form at the customer service desk that will let us get 11% off last week's purchase.
Bethany, that is awesome. Congratulations. And Brad, I think we actually got a second frugal win of the week this week. What do you got for us, man?
Yeah, this was a cool one. This was from Felix. Frugal win of the week. I replaced the dead battery on my 2010 Kindle 3G. So he has this Amazon Kindle from 2010. And it only cost $16. Hope to get another decade out of it. And that's awesome. Because a brand new Kindle, what, Jonathan, is going to cost you easily $60 to $100. So to get another, hopefully, decade out of this thing for $16, that's a big win.
That's amazing. And I wonder if he replaced it himself. Does it sound like he actually replaced it himself, went in there and switched that thing out?
That was my impression. I'm kind of fishing through the comments here. I don't see anything.
Sounds like he's like a YouTube ninja too, man. So there's like multiple aspects. You get a DIY win and a frugal win of the week.
All right, Jonathan, wanted to give a massive shout out to Jody. She is now debt-free.
Oh, Jody, congratulations. Tell us her story.
So she just paid off a car, and in 15 months, she said she's paid off $180,000 in debt. And she said, thank you, Brad and Jonathan, for helping her along the way.
Dude, I feel like we need like a sound effect right here. Like we need something. This deserves some form of a celebration. Can you whip us up a sound effect?
Yeah, I'll definitely make that happen for next week.
Awesome. Jody, huge congratulations. And I'm so excited for what that means for your future. Your financial freedom clock has begun.
All right, next I wanted to highlight a comment from Jenny about sustainable fashion. Yeah, Jonathan, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting. So Jenny was making the case with this comment, and she's linking to an article that we'll put in the show notes as well. She says that consumers shy away from better-made clothing that will last longer because it costs more, but the thinking is flawed. Better-made clothing can actually be cheaper in the long run. Because we have to wear something different every day, we think it can't be expensive, she says. So we buy more cheap clothing that isn't really high quality, that uses a lot of natural resources to produce, and then we end up throwing it out. And, I haven't quite digested that, but I had a thought that runs parallel to it is how often are we window shopping or browsing around or going to, whatever location, whatever shopping venue that we go to, and suddenly something catches our eye because it's on sale, because it's a deal, because it's 25% off or 30% off, maybe it's 40% off. And suddenly something that we didn't know we needed becomes something that we have to have because it's 40% off. And the logic here, and Brad, I'd love your thoughts on this. It's incredibly flawed because it's not 40% off, it's 60% on.
Yeah, no, that's a great way of putting it. And yeah, there's so many people who walk around patting themselves on the back about, oh, wow, I'm such a great shopper. I always get these good deals. Well, come on. Do you think the stores are really going bankrupt because you're getting the quote unquote sale? No, of course not. This is a game of psychology, right? And the stores are clearly winning. So yeah, to your point, that's 60% on. That's a great way of putting it.
And you want to know what's 100% off, Brad? It's staying home and playing board games with your family. When you get into a routine, like a grind, like, I'm speaking to myself, I'm speaking to my own family cycle. This is coming from like personal situations. It's very easy to get into a grind and say, you know what, to get out of our routine, to get out of our grind, we should go to Target, right? We should go to the mall. We should go to some place where we can just walk around and be in a different environment. And I understand that, but that's not the only option. It's not be home, be bored, or be at the mall and find something that's 25% off or 30% off if you're lucky. There are a million other options if you expose yourself to that. And the benefits can far exceed just the 25% off that you're getting. Be more creative. Actually spend that quality time with your family. Go find something adventurous to do in your city. There are so many frugal alternatives that truly are 100% savings. Don't trade that in for 25% off something you don't need or didn't even know existed.
All right, and the last shout out for today goes to Kelly. She switched her insurance policies.
Yeah, Zach, this was cool. Kelly said, I just reviewed and changed all 3 of my insurance policies and saved $1,500.
Whoa.
It was a job, but well worth the savings. That's really cool.
That is something that our community should slowly be doing. I like to think you do this post every Friday. What is the one thing you did this week? What if our community made it a challenge for themselves over the next 52 weeks, over the remainder of 2019, to take the inspiration, the different things that they've heard other people do on this show, and take something that just seems manageable, take something that seems achievable. Maybe it's a small challenge, but just stack it and do it once a week. Maybe just this week you start by freshening up your auto insurance policy quotes, just seeing what else is out there and seeing if there's a better rate. You might be surprised how much that 10 minutes that you spend checking to see if you can get a better rate, how much that saves you over the next couple of years. And you know what? That's a small thing. But then the week after that, why don't we check another aspect? Just slowly implement something else. Constantly be willing to just challenge yourself to push it that one extra little bit. And let's just see how far the aggregation of marginal gains actually takes you over the next year. All right, my friends. Well, unfortunately, that's going to bring this episode to a close. Now, as you know, we like to finish every episode by doing a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. And there's 3 books that we offer. The first is J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth. The second is Dominic Cortuccio's book, Design Your Future. And the third book from Vincent Puglisi, Freelance to Freedom. If you want to enter the drawing, all you need to do is just go to choosefi.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there and leave us a short written review and send us an email to feedback@choosefi.com, letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under. We give away 1 book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and we announce the winner on the Friday roundup. Brad, how many winners do we have today?
All right, Jonathan, we have 1 winner today, and the winner is Beatrice. And she said, it changed my future. I discovered the Choosify podcast and community almost 1 year ago, and since then, my life has completely changed. I didn't even know that there was no need to work in the corporate world forever. Every episode gives me a new idea that I can immediately implement. Thanks to all that, I will be able to be to Phi in less than 3 more years. Now I have something to really look forward to and enjoying the trip. Thanks, Brad, Jonathan, and all the community for everything you have done for me, even if you don't realize it.
She's going to be at Phi in less than 3 years. And prior to this, she thought she was going to have to work forever. Those two can exist side by side. And all we're trying to do is just slowly help bridge that gap. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.